how we're not designed to have problems. We're not designed to have stress in our life. And it's just a misunderstanding of who we are and how we operate that creates all those problems. And really I guess that's why we're here.
I have to be honest, when I saw your bio, your profile, it really resonated a lot with me about just sort of your background, your history, your approach to life. And I was like, this is a conversation that we have to have. I think there's a lot of goodness that'll come from this conversation. So I'm pretty psyched to have it. And I'm happy you're here with me.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it should be great.
Yeah, I love that. So let's, without further ado, really just, I guess, jump right in. I'd love if you can give our audience a brief background of kind of your story and all the highs, the lows, the kind of how you got here version would be awesome. Let's start there.
Okay, well, probably like everyone watching or listening, I've always been very driven to get the most out of life, be a success. And really, in every area of life, personally, relationships, family life, and obviously financial and career and business. And I've always been an entrepreneur and somebody who's had my own businesses. And that served me pretty well for quite a while. And I became really successful and, made a lot of money and had a lot of great experiences. But everything sort of changed a few years ago and I remember there was a bit of a pivotal moment when it all changed, because I was just putting this particular day, I remember, I was putting the finishing touches on my dream home. And I'd always had this idea of this magnificent house that I wanted to build myself, or get people to build for me, I should say. And I was putting the finishing touches. This was everything I'd ever dreamt of in a home. And part of it was a music room. I'd been a musician in my university student days, and I always had this dream of my own music room where I could go and just lose myself in making music. So anyway, this particular day, I remember, was a beautiful day, and I went into the music room and I sat down and I looked through the wonderful large windows that we'd just installed, and looked out on the mountains, an incredible view where the house was situated. And I remember thinking, this is amazing. This is it. I've achieved my dreams. I've achieved my goals. I always wanted to be in this situation where I'm a millionaire. I've got a couple of businesses that I own. I've got my perfect house. I've got the freedom to do things that I want to do, anything I want to do, really. So how do I feel? Do I feel really grateful, satisfied, happy? And I realized I didn't. I felt the absolute opposite of that. I was stressed. I was almost shaking with stress. I was almost in tears because I had all of the stuff that I'd always thought I wanted, but I didn't have what I thought I didn't have what I really wanted, which was to feel good, because I still had a ton of problems in my life. I still had all of these pressures and people demanding my time and problems demanding my time. And it felt like I was on this hamster wheel where I was just running as fast as I could. And every now and then I'd be able to take a bit of have a breather and relax a bit and say, oh, things are going pretty well. But then another tidal wave of more problems came along. And I never was at the point of feeling really satisfied and really happy and really comfortable with my life. And as I say, in this particular moment, I was completely stressed. And I said to myself, whether a voice or whatever it was said to me, maybe you'd be better to give up everything you own, start again. And at least then you would save your soul. Because really that's what it felt like, and if we've got lots of demands in our life, you don't have to be at an extreme, but you feel this pressure all the time that there's a certain area of your life that's maybe not good enough, or you don't feel in control of all of the things that you're trying to juggle in your life. But I was at the point where I said, maybe it'd be better if I started again, as long as I didn't lose my soul, because it felt like my life energy was being drained out of me. As they say, you have to be careful what you think about, because literally within a few weeks, that's what happened. I did lose everything except my soul. But, I lost the house. I lost my businesses. I lost my marriage. I lost all my money and everything that I owned. And I literally ended up with little more than the clothes on my back. And I had to move in with my elderly mother and sleep on the sofa in the living room of her small apartment. And, that was a huge change for me because it wasn't just losing, obviously, it wasn't just losing all my possessions. It was losing my identity. I didn't know who I was anymore. Here I was, a millionaire with a family and a marriage and businesses, a business owner and a beautiful home and a lovely bed to sleep in. All of that had gone. So I spent the next little while, few weeks and months actually, trying to figure out or trying to answer two questions that just kept, as I tried to get to sleep on the very uncomfortable sofa, I was tormented by these two questions. And the first one was, why has this happened to me? Because I wasn't just a successful businessman. I was one of those people, probably like many people listening or watching, and while you're here, is I wanted to find out what success was all about. How do you create success in your life? How do you achieve more success? So I used to read lots of books on personal development and self-help and motivation and goal setting and, changing your subconscious mind, rewiring your beliefs, all of these mental practices. And I did a lot of spiritual study as well, meditation, different practices on manifesting, which is one word that, comes up in spiritual circles. So I read all these books and I did all these courses. I went to seminars all over the world. And I'm from New Zealand originally, so going anywhere around the world's a long way. But I traveled to America and different places to seminars and workshops. And I could quote all of the gurus about how you create success. And I had my goals lists. I had everything mapped out about what I thought I wanted in my life. But this wasn't on my goals list. It wasn't, nowhere did I write down I want to be homeless and lose everything. So I wanted to ask the question and find the answer to, why has this happened to me? It shouldn't have happened to me. And I'm motivated. I'm prepared to do anything. I'll go and learn anything. I'll do anything anybody tells me if I think that's going to create more success in my life. But obviously, something didn't work. So why has this happened to me? And the second question I kept asking was, what do I do now? So what do I do now? Because here I was, I didn't have any money, I didn't know anybody, I was in a strange town which I hadn't been to for years, so I'd lost all my connections with people. I thought, what do I do now? And both of those questions, why has this happened to me, and what do I do now, I couldn't seem to find the answer, no matter how hard I searched, no matter how much I thought about it and tried to use all of the techniques I'd used for, learning about yourself and analyzing your beliefs and all those sorts of things. But here's the thing, I finally found the answer to both those questions. Why has this happened to me and what do I do now? And I discovered the answer, and it was exactly the same answer for both of those questions. So maybe somebody listening or watching might just like to think, so what is the answer to why had this happened to Liam, and what was his answer about what to do next? Well, the answer was, and as I say, it was the same answer for both questions. The answer was, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know why this has happened to me, and I don't know what to do next. Now, that might sound like a bit of a silly answer or non-answer, but what I didn't realize was what that actually did was something quite profound within my own brain. And it caused me to move in a completely different direction. And instead of trying to force things to happen in my life, instead of trying to figure things out, instead of trying to make things happen and use all my energy and motivation to try and do that, I just said, I don't know the answer. I accept that I don't know the answer. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to see what happens, see what shows up. It can't get any worse than this, after all. I'm going to do what people have called letting go, if you like. But I really let go and just said, I don't have any energy left. I'm just going to, that's it. I wasn't quite suicidal. Well, I wasn't suicidal, but I was really low, obviously, to get to that point, because I don't think I would have ever done that if I'd been in any other situation. I would never have got to the point where I really did just give up. And then weird things started to happen to me, and all sorts of things that you might call coincidences or luck, synchronicity. But good things started to show up in my life, and that's the only way I can explain it. that it started to show up. It wasn't through my struggle and force of trying to make it happen. So I found a new business. Now I'd always had businesses in my life. I've had 18 different businesses so far, always been an entrepreneur. And a business showed up, and before I knew it, I was running my own business again when I didn't have any money. That's the bizarre thing. And it became really successful, and I was making good money and starting to have some freedom. I could move out from my mother's sofa. Then I found a new person to have a relationship with, and it was a completely different sort of relationship, still going today, by the way, that I'd ever had in the past. This was so much more fulfilling and rewarding and less stressful. And then all of these other things really just fell into place. Before long, we bought a motorhome and travelled all around New Zealand where we lived. Then we set up another business and another business, and we ended up with two. We sold the first one, and we ended up with two businesses that were doing really well. And because we could manage them remotely, we took a one-way ticket and we went off to Europe. And before we knew it, we'd launched a new yacht, and we started sailing around Europe in our own yacht. And I remember this time, which we're still doing. We're still nomadic travelers. In fact, our next yacht is getting ready as we speak. But anyway, I remember once another pivotal moment was in the Greek islands, anchored in a bay. You can imagine this. We were the only boat. We're in this beautiful bay, all on our own. We'd spent the night there. And I got up in the morning and checked my email, and everything was going fine, making money. It was all going well. And I had a swim off the back of the boat, and I got out again, and I was just drying myself off. And I thought, this is it. This is what I've always been looking for. I'm living the dream. I'm doing what I love to do. But then I thought back to that time in the music room and thought, I had exactly those same thoughts then. But the difference was now how I feel, because I really feel that I've got what I've been looking for all this time. I feel a sense of purpose. I feel a sense of balance. I feel a sense of true creativity, of being in the flow, of gratitude, of really living my life to the full, if you like. And I thought, this is really weird. Why has this happened to me? Those questions again. Why has this happened to me? Because I couldn't work it out. But all I knew was, and what confused me, was to say, how come I'd spent all of those years doing what all of those people had told me to do? Set goals, really work hard, accept that problems are a natural part of your life and that you have to overcome them, and success is all about overcoming challenges so that you become stronger and better, but always having to deal with problems. Going after every opportunity, learning as much as I could. Why is it that I did all of those things and I was really motivated and determined? Why is it that what really happened then was I just created this life of confusion, stress, pressure, and lots of problems, and then everything collapsing. And now things are just flowing along, because now, this is me in the Greek islands, I thought, I don't set any goals. I don't have any expectations. I'm not going after opportunities. I'm not looking to improve my life, if you like, in that way. And yet everything's working so well. I don't have the problems and stress that I used to have, and I'm really living a life I love. So that's when I decided I do have a problem, one problem. I need to figure out what I'm doing differently. And I need to go and find out what it is, because I want to make sure I keep doing it. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it had created a very different life. So I went on a detective hunt or research project to try and figure out what it was that I was doing differently. And where that led me was to look in a completely different area that I'd never been heard about in all of the success seminars and books that I'd read. And yet it really struck me as that it's the answer. And what I do now is I share this information about how we are designed to thrive, how we are designed to be the best that we can be, how we're not designed to have problems. We're not designed to have stress in our life. And it's just a misunderstanding of who we are and how we operate that creates all those problems. And really I guess that's why we're here.
Well, A, that's an amazing story, so thank you for sharing all that. And B, I think what I'm hearing from that is really, to try and boil that down as simply as possible, is an alignment with your true identity and your authentic self, and just being in sort of like this flow state where you're not necessarily trying to control things outside of your control, but you're really just getting back to the roots of who you were designed to be and operating within your gifting. Do I hear that right?
Absolutely right. And of course, that's perfect. But of course, the issue is, how do you do that? How do you achieve that? Because we've been told things like, well, you have to believe and pray and meditate and have all these routines to do that. But I'd done all that stuff. And that's not what really got me in touch with my true self and got my life to really start flowing in a really abundant way. So, you know, that's the trick, is to know what really works, not what people tell us works that just keeps us stuck in a state of stress and frustration. So that was my journey, was to find out what really works and why.
Right. So what was the biggest thing that you saw in that journey as far as like trying to figure out why it worked so well for you that you might be able to pass on as a bit of advice or an example for somebody else to take inspiration from?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, the thing that I had completely overlooked, that no one had told me about, was really the most fundamental and the most basic thing of all. And that is that no matter what we think or want to happen in our life, we are controlled by the laws of nature. Nature rules everything. And yet most of us are fighting against nature. We're thinking that we can force things to happen, that we can make things to happen in an unnatural way. And I'd never thought about nature, but when I started sailing, of course, and traveling a lot, I spent a lot of time in nature, and it suddenly occurred to me that nature is not about struggle. Nature is about thriving. That is the natural state of all living things. Nature has a very low failure rate because nature has had millions and hundreds of millions of years to figure out the best way to survive. And that's not through struggle, and it's not through having problems. It's through efficiently managing life in a way that serves you and makes you the whatever it is, whatever species it is, makes it the best it can be so that it has the greatest chance for survival. So I'd overlooked that. And when I started to think about it, I thought, why do we overlook the laws of nature? I mean, if you just imagine me, and people have actually done this in history, by the way, but imagine if I stood on a 10-story building, or if you stood on a 10-story building and said, right, I have set a goal, and my goal is to walk off this building and fly up into the air. Now, it's on the surface, it sounds silly, but what happened if someone said to me, well, you can't do that? And I said, I can do it. I can do anything. I have set a goal. I have a vision of me flying. I'm visualizing it. I'm spending many hours a day visualizing, and I'm praying and I'm meditating on it. And I have all of these different techniques of changing my subconscious mind and changing my beliefs and rewiring my brain. And I have all of these different, manifesting techniques that mean, because we can achieve any goal we set ourselves, means I'll be able to fly up in the air. And of course, you walk off and you go straight down, because the law of gravity doesn't care what you think or what else you're trying to do. It's going to rule everything. So this is why it's so silly when we fight against nature. But the reason we do it is we don't understand how it works. And we also don't understand that there is a law of nature, just like there's a law of gravity. There's a law that determines how biological life is supposed to operate. And I mentioned it just before, that everything biological has one primary purpose, and that is to seek to survive. And that survival comes when an organism is the best it can be. When something is healthy and strong and thriving, that gives it the greatest chance to live the longest. So all of nature is wired to ensure, or try to ensure, that whatever organism it is, whatever it does is with the purpose of thriving, of being the best that it can be, so that it has the greatest chance for survival. And if you look, as I said earlier if you look through nature, that's what it's based on. Every living thing, the more you study this and look into this, every living thing is striving to be the best that it can be, and therefore to survive for as long as possible. Now, for humans, being the best that we can be doesn't just mean being our best physically. It also means being our best mentally and emotionally. In other words, it means being happy. It means being fulfilled. It means not being stressed. Stress does not extend our life. It shortens our life, creates disease. There's a ton of research on that. So it actually means having a life without problems. It means doing what you're here to do, to be your best. That's the purpose of human life as well. But if you say to most people, Are you thriving? Are you being the best that you can be? Are you living your biological purpose? Are you doing what you're supposed to do on a physical level? Most people would say no, wouldn't they? They'd say, no, I'm not. There's so much more that I could do. There are so many things I'm frustrated by in my life. I'm so stuck in where I am. I'm so confused. So the logical question becomes, well, if our purpose is to be this thriving being, each of us, and we have a word for that, it's being in the flow. It's when you have those moments, and we've all had them, where you really do feel like you're being your best and everything's just falling into place and you feel inspired or creative or motivated, and you're just saying, this is great. Now, these moments don't last very long for most of us, but that's actually the way we're supposed to be all the time, pretty much, apart from one exception, general exception. But that's the way we're supposed to live most of our life. But most of us aren't. So why aren't we? Well, it turns out there's only one reason as well. We're not using the mechanism the right way that is designed to make sure that happens. And there is a mechanism. There is a system that's been created in nature that every living thing possesses, and every living thing except us uses the right way to ensure that it thrives. And that thing or mechanism is a brain. You know, the brain isn't just there to keep your heart beating and your organs functioning. It's there to ensure that you thrive. And science actually has a word for this state of thriving. It's called homeostasis, which means the optimum functioning of the organism. So your brain is that machine that's designed for you to achieve this optimum functioning state. However, if it's not doing that, there's only one conclusion you can come to, and that is, well, I have this machine. It's designed to do a job. It's designed to make sure that I thrive, that I'm the best that I can be so that I have the greatest chance for survival, and it's not doing that. What's wrong? Well, what's wrong is you're not using the machine the right way. It's the only logical explanation, unless you have a faulty machine. But, you know, nature doesn't create faulty machines anymore. Maybe it did millions of years ago, but biologically, all of those imperfections have been evolved, if you like, out. So it can only be we're using this machine the wrong way. And so then I started to study the brain and see how it actually works on a biological level. And I'm not talking about the subconscious and, you know, all those sorts of things. I'm talking about something very biological, chemical, physical in your brain. And then I realized that, yes, we have all been taught to use it the wrong way. And it's exactly the reason why we struggle, why we have problems, why we have stress, and why we're not thriving. But when you understand how it works, first of all, when you understand what it's designed to do, that, you know, I'd never heard that actually your brain is designed to make you thrive. Your purpose is to not have problems. Nobody had ever told me that. They told me the opposite. So when you accept that, when you understand that and know that that's the truth, scientifically true, biologically true, then all you need to do is say, well, I need to understand how this machine works, and then start using it the way it was designed to be used. And it's amazing how your life changes when you do that. And I look back and I worked out, I back engineered what had happened to me, and I saw that's exactly what had happened to me. I didn't know it, but I was using a different part of my brain. I'd been forced to use a different part of my brain, and that's when everything started to change. So it's this isn't spiritual. It has funnily enough, spiritual traditions throughout history, such as the Bible, and all spiritual teachers have taught us how to use our brain in a practical sense, but we haven't really been listening. And, you know, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, which makes a ton of sense. I think it's almost gotten to this part where you're fighting against yourself. You're trying to control the entire process rather than just letting it flow. And you're trying to force yourself to be in a situation where you're not necessarily supposed to be. If you just kind of let go of control and allow yourself to flow, you'll find things work a lot better. It reminds me a lot of, you know, the concept of trying to catch a butterfly. Do you run frantically around the garden trying to catch it, or do you just be still and build a beautiful garden and allow the butterfly to come to you? Like, that's the visualization I get from what you're describing there, as far as like your relationship with your brain and how that kind of, you know, works together.
Yes, you know, I mean, there's a lot of talk, isn't there, about letting go and allowing and all those sorts of things. But how many of us actually really do it? None of us, virtually. And the reason we don't do it is we don't understand that we really are designed to be like that we really do have this machine. Because an analogy that I use sometimes is, imagine if you get into a motor car and you know what the motor car is designed to do. It doesn't think. It's just as a machine. And it's designed to get you to wherever you want to go or wherever you should go in an easy and enjoyable, comfortable way. Now, do you have faith in that motor car? Do you believe? Do you say, well, I have to let go and allow it to do its job? I mean, obviously you need to drive the car, but you don't drive it with any effort or any struggle or strain. But you let go in a different way, don't you? You let go and you allow it to do its job because you just know, well, that's exactly what it does. I don't need to think about it. I don't need to doubt it or question it. I mean, you don't get out every 5 minutes or 1 minute to check that the engine's still running or that it still has wheels on, or, and you're not sitting in your car all stressed that it's going to go. You just know that's the way it works. But imagine a scenario with a motor car where you didn't know how it worked, and maybe you were a tribesman, and you came out of the bush and you saw this thing and somebody said, oh, that's a motor car, it'll take you anywhere you want to go. And you didn't know how it worked, and you went, oh, well, that sounds good. I wonder what I should do. And you thought, and you looked around and there were people with motor cars, and they seemed to know a bit more about how a car worked, but they were all standing behind their motor cars trying to push them along. And some people were putting in tremendous effort and they were looking really motivated and determined. And, some people were stopping and building up, working on doing muscle exercises to strengthen their muscles. And they're all huffing and puffing, but they weren't getting very far. Now, you would think, if that was the case, well, obviously a motor car, it is designed to get you somewhere, but it's a struggle. It's difficult and you have to be strong. And it's always going to be hard and you're not going to get very far unless you put in more and more effort. So that's what you do as well. But if somebody came along to you and said, look, everybody, why are you doing this? This is crazy. This is not how the machine is designed to be used. You're just making things far too hard for yourself. All you're doing is wearing yourself out and beating yourself up and saying that you're not motivated enough and you're not strong enough and you need to develop yourself to be stronger. We'd all think, if we knew differently, that would be utterly ridiculous. But that's what it turns out, unfortunately, most of us are doing with our life. We're using our brain in such a way so we make it really hard for ourselves. And that's not natural. And it's all because we don't understand that it's just a machine. And if you use it the right way, it's going to do what it's supposed to do. It's going to do its job, which it doesn't. If it's not designed to create problems in your life. It's not designed to get you doing the wrong things, making bad decisions. Like everybody, I used to make some terrible decisions. I think, why did I do that? Why did I marry that person? Why did I employ that person? Why did I do all these stupid things? So we don't know why we have so many problems in our life, but it's because this brain, we're using a part that's a different part to the thriving part. We're using a part that keeps us stuck and confused. So it all sounds quite logical when you start to think about it, but what I realized was I'd never really heard this before. And maybe that's why it didn't work,
Which makes sense. And I'm glad you brought up the faith component of it too, because I think that that's a tremendous part there. And it really prevents a lot of people from taking that quote unquote leap to let go of control and just be in the flow of their life. And I think for people to develop the faith in, hey, you are exactly where you need to be, things will work out for you if you just let go of control and just be in this moment that you were designed to be at. And I think that for a lot of people, they might say that with words, but they don't necessarily believe it with their heart and act it out in real life. They still want to kind of keep a finger or two on the steering wheel and say, hey, I want to be in control of this entire process. I'm not totally going to release control and actually have faith in the fact that if I just continue to do what I'm designed to do and to follow my purpose, that things will work out for me. They want to really still be in that control. Does that sound right?
Yeah, but the question is, really, that's totally right. But the question is, why don't we believe? Why do we? Because we can say, I want to have faith, and we can say, well, most people don't have faith. So we can identify the problem, but the real problem is not that you shouldn't have faith. The real problem is understanding why you don't have faith. I mean, like I mentioned with the motor car, do you have faith that the car is going to drive if you steer it the right way? Do you have faith that driving down the road and you see other cars coming towards you, that they're going to stay out of your way? Do you have faith that that's going to happen? Do you have faith that you're going to keep breathing? Do you have faith that you're going to wake up tomorrow morning, or that the sun is going to rise tomorrow morning? Do you have faith that your heart's going to keep beating, that you're going to stay alive? This isn't I mean, on one level, you could say, well, I do have faith in those things, but it's not really faith, is it? It's a knowingness. And knowingness comes from understanding. You don't say, I don't need to believe it. That's just the way it works. I know it's the way it works because I have proof and evidence and experience, which all says to me convincingly, that's the way it works. Believing it is not a struggle. So that's the problem with faith, is people are trying to believe something when they have no understanding about it. We're trying to believe that our life will turn out right, but we don't understand how it's designed to and how it will. So that's what stops us from knowing that it's going to happen.
So if we go on that a little bit, is there also then a component of paying attention to what is happening every day to build up the pattern recognition of, hey, this is how this works, right? Because for all of these days in a row, you've woken up, your heart has kept beating, cars have not crashed into you, right? You've got a history of these things being true, that you've recognized, hey, when A happens, B is going to happen. This is like the pattern that you recognize. So is there a case to be made here for you consciously reprogramming that knowingness of, hey, this is how this is supposed to work? Maybe for the first 30 years of my life, I thought I had to be in control, and this is the way that I believed it worked. Now I need to sort of reprogram myself to understand that was wrong. This is how it actually works. And every day I need to start recognizing these little miracles, these little signs, these little situations that actually work out in my favor that I may have not been paying attention to. But if I start to consciously pay attention to those things and become aware of them, then I start to see more of them and understand that as truth.
Yeah, I actually think it's a little bit simpler than that. I agree with what you're saying, but we can make it actually a lot simpler, because it's a little way. Bring it back to the motor car analogy. If you know that you have a machine that's designed to get you to where you want to go, then all your focus needs to be on understanding how to drive that machine. It's learning how to drive, learning about it. Now, you don't need to learn all of the intricate details of a motor car, but you need to know enough to know what buttons do what and how it actually works. And more importantly, or equally importantly, how you're supposed to operate it. That's where you put your focus. You don't sit up in the morning and say, right, I'm really going to be a good driver today, without learning how to use the machine. So it comes down to, all you need to do is to understand how your brain works. And we could go over this in brief detail if you like, what you're doing when you're creating problems in your life, and how you can activate instead a different part of your brain, which is the part that's designed to make you thrive, that you have activated from time to time in your life, and that has got you good results, but you didn't know how or why you were activating it. And make that your conscious activity. It's the only thing you need to do. And in fact, in the Bible, for instance, using a spiritual text to explain this, the Bible tells us that that's the only thing we should do, the only thing we should focus on in our life, the only single activity we need to do to make our life thrive, to make it be the kingdom of heaven, which is what it's supposed to be. And it tells us over and over and over this one thing to do. All you need to do all day, every day, is just change that one habit, do that one thing, and your life, and you will thrive in your life, and you will have what the Bible tells you: freedom from problems, freedom from stress, living in this paradise. So it's actually quite simple. But like anything, and we'll talk about what it is if you like, but it's not necessarily easy, I should say to people, because we've been conditioned our entire life to do it in a different way. We've been conditioned to get out and push from behind all the time. So it's not easy to give up habits of a lifetime, but the key is to understand how it works and the mechanism behind it. And then you just do the simple thing that, as I say, the Bible tells you to do, the one thing. And I'm not coming at it purely from a spiritual perspective, because this has a whole scientific perspective as well as to how it works biologically. But that's really all you need to do. The problem is we've completely overcomplicated life. We overthink everything. We think we've just got to learn a new way of doing things. We've got to get some more information, and we have to just keep trying harder and piling more stuff into our life and writing things down. And that's not really a very natural way to live. So that's the explanation, really.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. So what is the actual brain mechanism responsible there?
Well, I've actually created, and people can find this on my website if they'd like to find out more. It's a simple 4-part brain model, which is backed up by all of the science, and it always has scientific terms. There's essentially 4 different regions in your brain that all have a different function. But the way these, and the two, I'll mention the 2 most important ones to start with, but the way your brain is designed is that it's designed to keep you in this thriving state, in this state where you have all of the resources at your disposal and you're using all of the things that you need to be your best. And what are those things? They're things like creativity, imagination, intuition, that little voice in your head that's telling you the right thing to do and saying to you, don't do that or do that. That's your intuition, that little voice. It's your motivation. It's your inspiration. It's where you get new ideas. It's the part of your brain, for instance, when you work, it's the problem-solving part of your brain, because we've all been in the situation where you've had this problem or you've had to make a decision and you just didn't know the right thing to do, and you had it rocking around your brain for days or weeks, and you'd write things down and you'd ask people or maybe go online to try and find an answer, and you'd rationalize things and come up with why you should do this and why you shouldn't and all of these things. And then you forget about it for a while, and all of a sudden an idea comes to you and you go, that's the answer. Why didn't I think of that before? So all of these qualities, if you like, all of these resources that we have, these are what helps us thrive. These are what make us thrive. And these are what keep us in the flow and in the zone. When we're getting great ideas and when we're seeing opportunities, when we're meeting the right people, when we're avoiding problems, when we're solving problems, it's that flow state. It's being that thriving state. I'm sure we can all relate to that. That's the way we're designed to be naturally. That's what achieves this state of homeostasis, optimum functioning, is when we're using all of those resources. So this part of the brain, which is located right in the very center of our head in a physical location, this is the part we're naturally designed to use all of the time. However, and I call it our thriving state. That's our thriving brain. That's one of the 4 parts of the brain. But there's another part of the brain, which I call our surviving brain. And the surviving brain is responsible for all of your your unconscious functions to keep you alive. Your breathing, your heart rate. It manages all of the physical aspects of your physical functions of your body. But it also manages this thing we call a fight-flight response, which is a reaction to danger. So the way the brain is designed, you're supposed to live in this thriving state. And if you go back hundreds of thousands of years when humans were first forming, if you like, we lived in a dangerous world. We lived with threats all around us. So although we were designed to be in this thriving state, using all these wonderful resources to make our life the best it could be, although we were designed to be there naturally, we had to have some weapon to protect us if, say, a lion jumped out from behind a rock, or we were presented with an immediate threat or a danger. And what happens in the brain is when that happens, when your brain recognizes a threat or a danger, it moves away from your thriving state temporarily into this surviving state to deal with that threat or problem. And we do things, as we know, imagine if a lion came along, you'd run out of the way, or you'd run away, or you'd cry out for help, or you'd stand and be ready to fight, or whatever it is. You'd do one of those few things. You'd react without thinking instantly to deal with that threat. And the way we're biologically designed is we use that state only when we're faced with an immediate threat, an immediate danger. And the rest of the time, we're supposed to be living in this thriving state. But the problem is, most people are living in this fight, flight, surviving state most of the time. But here's what happens. When you live in that state, or when you're in that state, you temporarily shut off all of your thriving resources. So all of the things, you shut off your thriving brain. So creativity, imagination, the answer to problems, what your goals should be that are going to make you the best that you can be, what you should be doing, your motivation, you don't have access to any of those resources. You're stuck in this reactive state, which is a very limited thinking state. And it's only designed for those short, brief bursts of getting rid of the danger so you can get back to thriving. And so we have these two states. We have our thriving state, which is our default state. We're supposed to live most of the time. And we have a surviving state to deal with any occasional threat or problem in our life. And of course, we don't have threats or problems. We don't have lions wandering around. But our brain still is creating this impression that we do. And what the activator is, if you can imagine these two mental states, one is thriving, access to all of these great things, living a great life in the flow, and the other is struggling, trying to fight off a danger in your surviving state. They don't coexist. They can't exist at the same time. But the activator, you could say, well, what decides which part of your brain that you're using? The activator is fear. So when you feel fear, and with that stress, worry, anxiety, frustration, anger, sadness, what's literally happening on a chemical level is your brain is activating your struggle state. And that's why if you have problems, what happens when we're stressed and worried and afraid and unhappy? We sit there and we go, what do I do to fix my problems? We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to work it out. We're trying to look for answers. And we're saying, why can't I be happy? What do I need to be happy? We're operating but we can never find the answers to that because all the answers are in our thriving brain. So what most people are doing without them realizing is they're using a part of their brain that keeps them stuck and they're trying to manage their life from that. And it's impossible to do that. So the only name of the game is to say to yourself, my mission in life is to identify what it is that's making me feel afraid, feel stressed, worried, and anxious, and eliminate those triggers. And coming back to the Bible, this is the instruction of the Bible. It says in the Bible 365 times, be not afraid. And it's not saying that as some nice idea. Try not to be so afraid, It's saying, be not afraid. This is an instruction. This is how you're designed to be. This is how your brain works. And it also says in the Bible, have no fearful, do not worry about tomorrow. It's going to take care of itself. Do not worry about what you shall eat, drink, and wear. It's going to be provided for you. Now, it doesn't say, do not worry about what you shall eat, drink, and wear. If you work hard enough, if you set goals, if you overcome, and if you become worthy of receiving these good things, what you shall eat, drink, and wear, then you have to earn it. It's not saying that. It said it's going to be provided for you, just like it is in the rest of nature. And that's what's happening in the rest of nature. The rest of nature doesn't struggle to find food or shelter. It just does. It's provided for it. So the only thing we need to do, and that's coming down to this simple idea, simple but far from easy, is to say what I need to do is identify, because it comes down to triggers. I need to identify all of the things that are making me feel bad, that are making me feel stressed, worried, anxious, frustrated, all of those things, and eliminate those things so that I stop being stuck using the wrong part of my brain and allow my thriving brain to take over. And people are probably listening to say, well, that's easy, but it's my problems that are making me stressed, worried, and afraid. It's not actually your problems. It's your perception of your problems. It's what you think, what your brain, not you, but what your brain thinks they mean. If you, for instance, have this, watching the news and somebody says there's going to be World War III happening tomorrow, how does that make you feel? It makes you feel stressed, worried, and afraid. Well, it's not the fact that World War III might be happening. Probably won't be, of course. It never seems to eventuate. But it's not that it's happening. It's what your brain thinks might happen if it did happen. What might happen to you? That you're going to be hurt, that you might even die. So this part of the brain perceives that as a threat to your survival. And therefore, it says it puts you in the surviving state, and it's automatically looking for a solution. And you can't find a solution to World War III happening, can you? But your brain is looking for one. Right, what do you need to do to solve this problem? So really, what I'm saying is that's what it comes down to, is recognizing there are all sorts of triggers. The news is a good one, but there are external triggers and also internal triggers, things that make your brain interpret an event or potential event as a threat, as a danger to you. And really, we have no threats or dangers to our survival. It's only from our limited perspective that we do. And once you start eliminating the triggers, you activate and develop your thriving state, and your life goes in a completely different direction, a far better direction. And the direction we're all supposed to be going on, which is having life as an adventure, having fun, enjoying ourselves, not constantly trying to figure out how to solve up and creating problems for ourselves. That's not natural.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I think people don't necessarily realize that, like, while we might not be wandering around constantly in fear of being attacked by a lion, we do have these things that we keep with us, these phones that ding and alert us all the time, which keep us on that high alert sense of, oh, there was a noise. What does it mean? Is it a problem? And we have control over what we consume, right? So we may not be able to control whether or not World War III breaks out tomorrow. We can control whether or not we are paying attention to news alerts, or we have them turned on our phone, or we are constantly consuming this information and putting ourselves on edge for no reason. Right? So we do have some level of control in that I think that we bear some responsibility to pay attention to how much we are negatively affecting ourselves by just not paying attention to the stuff that we are putting in our zone of awareness. And then we're getting upset that we are living in this fight or flight mode all the time, when we have some control over, hey, what am I paying attention to? Could I make a little bit of a concerted effort to not consume all of this stuff all the time? And maybe I focus on the positive, maybe I focus on whatever else, or I just allow myself to be free and aware to consume whatever anything else brings me, and not constantly pinging myself with all this negative attention crap. Right. So I think that there's a lot of, there was a tremendous amount of information that you just shared. Let's say that. So thank you for all of that, because that was consuming information from a fire hose. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, just one thing. I know I'm probably going on a bit here, but one thing is, we don't just have some control. We have total control over what we decide to put into our awareness and our attention. And we not only have total control, but that's the only thing we need to do, is to control what we allow into our perception, if you like. So, and that's again what every spiritual tradition and science is telling us. You know, your awareness is created by your interpretation and your decisions. So we can make the decision to turn off the news permanently. That's what I did a long time ago. Stop watching the mainstream news. If you want to know what's going on, at least find somebody who's a bit independent and who might actually want to tell you what they think is going on, not what's necessarily going on, but what they think is going on, rather than what they think they want you to think about what's going on. But we have this power, if you like, and responsibility and control over every single thing in our environment. We have the ability to not have conversations if we can walk away from people. We can walk away from any situation. We don't need to stay stuck. Now, some of these decisions are more difficult than others. It's a bit more difficult to walk away from a relationship than it is from a conversation. But nevertheless, you have to ask yourself, if my brain is designed to make me thrive, and the only thing that's getting in its way is that I'm putting situations that make me feel bad, that therefore put me in the wrong brain state, then all I need to do is stop putting myself in situations that make me feel bad. And as I say, sometimes it's a bigger decision than others, but that's the only thing you have to do. That's it. And as you do that, the more you do that, what we don't realize is that your perceptions change. You know, once you start using your thriving brain, your awareness shifts. You start to see things differently. And you start to see the way you really are, the way life really is. You're not some weak, pathetic thing that, you know, can be stamped out by other people, or, you know, you don't have to spend your life trying to get safety and security by earning as much money as you can and by building up all this protection for yourself, because you're not a fragile being. You have an infinitely powerful brain mechanism designed to lead you and make sure you do all the right things and all the right things happen. So when your awareness shifts, that's when you start to realize that, you know, your only job here is to say, why am I, you know, what can I do to eliminate these triggers that are making me feel bad? That's the enemy.
Right. Well, I want to honor you for this conversation, because there was a tremendous amount of knowledge shared. And I know that you've spent a lot of time acquiring the knowledge, so I appreciate you sharing that here with us today. And again, just truly appreciate it, and incredible honor to sit and have this conversation. It's been a tremendous amount of fun. So thank you for that. Where can people follow you, learn more, go deeper on this?
Just go to my website, which is just my name, Liam Naden, LIAMNADEN.com. And I've got a lot of information there. I've actually got a cheat sheet if people would like to download, which is a 3-step process, which sums up exactly what we've been talking about. The only 3 things you need to do, simple things to start your creative brain, your thriving brain, getting you living the life that you're designed to live. So that's all on my website, liamnaden.com. Thanks.
Perfect. I'll be sure and share that in the show notes. And again, thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Jim. It's been an honor being with you. Thanks a lot.